Alright, first off, want to give all praises, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bashem Yahushai, Bashem Rakakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule well. Shalom to the brothers in the highways and byways pushing this word in all sincerity and truth. The sisters, the believers, the helps, the hopeful elect. Shalom. This is the brother Irawam from James Jamaica camp, coming with another quick lesson. And you know, if you got if the Lord Yahweh Shem Yahshua has blessed you with this knowledge, and particularly, blessed you, to be under the men who they're actually dealing with, meaning the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, starting with the apostle Torah and down, that give this 100% truth and, have the spirit of Yahweh Shem Yahshua. Pray how Bashem Yahshai to keep the spirit on us, and on these men as well, to help us, through the spirit of Yahweh Bashem Yahshai to be unto salvation. All right. Now, I was watching the elder brother Yeshua Wamba's video, about what was it called? Floodlight behavior, right? And one of the precepts that he brought out in the beginning of the lesson was that there's no new thing under the sun, right? Now, yesterday while I was at camp, while I was speaking, and we were actually breaking down the MOTB, right? Yeah, we were breaking down the MOTB, and I was explaining that the ancient languages, such as the Greek, the Hebrew, and even languages like Spanish and those other those other languages outside of English, they have such they're very specific. The words are very specific, and it's not like English where you have one word for the same thing, or one word for two different things. So even in regards to when you're using a sentence or when they're saying something, based on the conjugation, meaning that based on how it starts or how it ends, you will know if it's if the statement is directed towards a male, whether it's directed towards a female, and even in some cases whether or not it's directed towards a child or even an adult, based on the cultural aspects of the language and various other things. And we were saying that when John was explaining what the MOTB was, right, the word that he used, he selected that word for a reason, right? When he chose the word charagma, it was chosen for a reason. It must have been based on something that he knew, right? And at that time, it was the time of the Roman Empire, right? And I based off various things that I see in the scriptures, seeing that it was a time when Rome was leading. A lot of even the words used in the Old Testament, the New Testament, Slakia, it goes back to Roman customs. And if you have an idea of the Roman history, you can get a clearer understanding, such as terms like centurion, like what is a watch, who is was it a procreator, things like that, or prefect, things like that. Those type of terms, have some Roman history and things to it. And if you look in the Greek Thayer's lexicon, you usually get, a little more detail, right? Now, let me just read this precept and then I will continue, right? So this is Ecclesiastes 1 verse 8. It says, all things are full of labor, man cannot utter it, the eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing, right? It says, the thing that had been is that which shall be, and the thing which is done is that which shall be done. There is no new thing under the sun. All right. So what in the ancient world was considered to be charagma, and what is it called in the modern world, right? The same behaviors from back then, they're here now. Some people might see even security guards. A good example, security guards. Based on some of these structures of these security companies, security guards are what's in the ancient world were known as barons, right? They usually guard that, and then you had the bodyguards and things like that. Yeah, you had bodyguards back then, but they just weren't called bodyguards. Some of them were called knights. You know, there were different names and different things. So going back to Karagma, what was classified as Karagma back then? Because John used that word for a specific reason, right? Verse 10 says, "Is there anything whereof it may be said, see, this is new? It had been already of old time, which was before us." Right? And one of the things that the Elder Yeshua was going into is the fact that, these ancient gods of these ancient civilizations, they're back here today. The customs are back here today. They're just under different names, and it's pretty much repackaged, right? But really, it's not new. And once again, I say, that is why even the scriptures, the behaviors and things written in the scriptures, you see a man behave a particular where you see something happen, you can say, oh, that is why the scripture say X, Y, Z. This is why the scripture, because everything, it is the complete record, right? Now, as it says, there's no new thing under the sun. Now, today, while I was actually, buying some water, here in the city, we have to buy like these big jugs of water, because the piping system ain't that good. So when I was in the place getting the water, what they did was because of the medical emergency that's currently all around the world, they take the bottles, they sanitize them, and then what they do is they write the initial of the person who owns the bottle. Right now, one of the employees went in the store and said to his coworker, who does this bottle belong to? And then the boss came and said, hey, you don't need to ask him whose bottle who does this bottle belong to, or who does that bottle belong to, because all of them are marked, right? Now, when I was growing up, in Jamaica, we used to have a thing. Anything that's all we say, we used to mark it. So say, look, mark your bag, mark your shoes, because especially if you're same brands, everything. So you don't want your bags to get mixed up. You don't want things to be mixed up. Similar lunch kits and things like that. They would either write the names or the initials, or have some form of mark, meaning something that's there to identify that this is yours or this belongs to you. Right? So what she was saying is that you don't need to ask whose it is, because only thing you need to ask is who is JD, or who is MW, or the initials are there, they are marked, right? And I just laughed to myself. All right. So with this current lesson, I'm actually going to go into the history. When based on what I said at camp, I told myself, the Lord put the Spirit on me to say, what, let me just go and check the history with the Romans and everything. And what we're going to explore in this lesson is that what they call charagma in ancient Rome is what we call an ID today. So all those who were saying, it was an embargo and it was this and it was that, that's pretty much what a charagma is. All right. So let me get one more scripture, and then I get into the various articles. Right. So I guess that you guys wanted John to say that they received an ID in their forehead and in their right hand. Where am I looking for? History, right? So this is Romans 15 verse 4, right? One of my favorite scriptures. It says, for whatsoever things were written aforetime were written for our learning, that we through patience and comfort of the scriptures might have hope, right? So that is why we also study to show ourselves approved. Right man, a workman, needed not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth, right? So let's go into the history. All right. Before I get this one, let me get here, right? So this was from, I typed in charagma in Rome, and then clicked on images, right, in Google, and it says Roman slave market, charagmas about their necks. Right? So Roman slave market, charagmas about their necks. All right, let's get some more details right here. I'm going to read this section right here. I'll take it close to the top so you guys can follow along. It says, I'll start right here. It says, articles of articles of clothes and social demeanor also marked or identify a man and his status. A man might go about with a colimanus or reed pen behind his ear as a badge of his employment, and similarly a carpenter carried a small wooden rule behind his ear. Right? The use of more official identifications, once again, the use of more official identifications made of copper, brass, silver, or gold with family seals was a common practice. Right? So you had also official identifications going on. Right? It says slaves in the marketplace were given dried clay tablets to identify their owner, their qualifications, and origins. If such tablets were baked with the seal of the owner, they took on a preeminence that protected the slave from unwarranted detention as he traveled through the public streets on errands for his master. So just having one of these tablets with the owner's seal on it would actually stop him from what? Unwarranted detention, because he could be identified. He knows who he belonged to. Right? It says that etched document. So okay, let me right. That etched document, etched going back to what? The carving, was referred to as charagma. Hence you have charagma, then you have, it goes on to charax, and then it goes down back to what? Grapho, written information. It all goes back to what? An ID. Right? An identifying mark. Right? It says was a badge of servitude. Right? It says the etched document was referred to as charagma, which was a badge of servitude, as oaths of loyalty to the government of Rome and its rulers became commonly required during the early rise of Christianity. The evidence of such pledge of allegiance was often upon paper in front of witnesses and signed under penalty or perjury. A study of these paper trials show of proof of allegiance and subjection to authority is a parallel to our modern times. So one of the use of, because there were various types of charagmas, right? So some charagmas were actually papers that showing proof of allegiance and subjection to authority, right? Meaning what? Roman authority, right? There's more, right? Same painting from before, but it has more details. It says the painting shows a Roman slave market with people wearing clay tablets to identify them and the owner of their labor, identifying slaves and a citizen, eligibility for benefits, and even a liability for taxes in Rome was often done with a clay plaque made with a charag to produce a charagma. Right? Read that again. It says identifying slaves and a citizen's eligibility. So to identify whether it be a slave or to verify if you're eligible citizen, for if you're a citizen who's eligible for benefits, and even a liability for a tax in Rome. So if you find out if you owe tax, right, was often done with a clay plaque made with a charag to produce a charagma. The Greek word charagma is translated mark as in MOTB, right? In the book of Revelation. The word means specifically a badge of servitude. Beasts in prophecy are generally identified as governments of the world. What is your government issued badge of servitude required by law in almost every country in the world to get work, bank accounts, benefits, even a passport or identification? So you actually, in every society or in Roman society, there were actually systems in place to identify those who were actually in allegiance or subjection to their whosoever is ruling, the authority at that time, which in that time it was Rome, right? Also, there's more, right? Let me get the actual article, and I'm just going to skim through it as a bit, hope this is edifying. And once we want to give all praises to Yahweh Hashem Yahushai, let's go through, right? It says the word charagma is a Greek word found in Latin texts of the time of the Messiah. In the Greek concordance, it is listed as 5480, the word charagma, from the same as charax, from charasso, to sharpen, to a point, right? Mark, graven, stamp, an imprinted mark, right? Of the mark stamped on the forehead or right hand as a badge of the followers of the Antichrist, which that makes no sense. The mark branded upon horses, thing carved, sculpted, engraven work. Also of second 2a says of idolatrous images. To engrave thing in clay, a charax would be used, right? So to engrave anything into clay, a charax would be used. That is why the root word of charagma is charax, right? It says the Romans would call objects with names or identified marks charagma or charagmet, right? Once again, the Romans would call objects with names or identifying marks charagma or charagmet, because you're going to say that, hey, the RFID the radio frequency identity card, well, not a card, but you get what I mean, the RFID micro, that you'd say that is not clay, but guess what? That's where the information is stored. That's what it's written on, right? So pretty much, once again, what John was saying is that, look, they will receive an ID, right? They will receive an object, right, with names, or an object with an identifying mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, right? It says even tesserae, meaning tile with tokens, could be engraved of clay, lead, bronze, even clay or lead, or even bronze or stone, right? Let me go through. It says there are many examples throughout history of the use of such items to identify individuals, right? Once again, there are many examples throughout history of the use of such items to identify individuals, right? It says these tokens became evident for your entitlement. All right, these evidence became evidence of your entitlements in the world of Rome, right? In ancient times, the fathers of elders of a household gave tessera hospitalis as a gift to identify trusted friends or servants of the family, called tesserae hospitalis, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. These ties were hereditary, with responsibilities descending from generation to generation, right? Now, let me jump down a bit. Well, let me continue, right? It says the tessera hospitalis was the token of mutual hospitality and is spoken of under hospitium, and it gives a page number. It says this token was probably in most cases of earthenware having the head of Jupiter Hospitalis stamped on it. So as you can see, it also goes back to idolatry. Now it says when the state became the conscripted fathers of the people by election and application, the same system was used to provide government welfare. It is clear that these are almost precisely the duties and the practices developing upon members of our great Slovakia. Let me read that once more. It said it is clear that these are almost precisely the duties and practices devolving upon members of our own great benevolent society at the present time when appealed to by a citizen in distress. Right? Jumping down, it says many societies became dependent upon elaborate systems of taxation which required systems of identification of the members or citizens. Right? It says these Pinocchion were used to identify an individual's obligations and entitlements or benefits in a particular society. They were often made of clay with etched information in them before they were fired, meaning that they were baked, before they were baked. Right? Goes on to talk about the things that were taxed, right? Right. It goes on to show that this is one of the systems that they put in place to see, you know, who were taxed. Right. Now it says not only, jumping down here, it says not only had to I'm trying to make this short. It says even the research of modern scholars has not been able to identify all the names. They not only had to collect these taxes, but they had to keep track of who had paid and who had not, as well as who was a taxpayer and who was exempt or excluded. Among the slaves, citizens, and residents, there were more than one status. They had many ways to keep track of slave and freeman, as well as who had paid and who was still owing on the myriad of taxes, fees, and tariffs, including interest and penalties. So once again, it's about, you know, tracking information, keeping account of information. Now it says both Greeks and Romans used small frame boards filled with wax or clay. A thin coating of dark wax was used for brief or short-term notations. Right? Jumping down. There's another part. It says tokens given at certain times by Roman magistrates to citizens in exchange for what they received a fixed amount of wheat of money. So you see, at times the system was used for what? You know, to identify citizens, right? So it says tokens given at certain times by the Roman magistrate to citizens in exchange for what they received a fixed amount of wheat or money. Right? This was the original EBT card. Right? To obtain welfare in the form of free benefits from benefactors who exercise authority one over the other. Right? Jumping down, it still has the reference of the word tessella, right? A square cube, a die token, a small tablet of wood or bone or ivory used by ancient Romans as a ticket or tally voucher or means of identification. Now jumping down here, it says charagma is well attested to have been an imperial seal of the Roman Empire used on official documents. Right? I'll read that again. A charagma is well attested to have been an imperial seal of the Roman Empire used on official documents during the 1st and 2nd centuries. So it's something to prove of validity, right? It says the Roman government under Augustus has already been using inscribed tiles, which are the charagmas, as proof of entitlement to the periodic gain doles. Not sure what that was. It says in the time of Caligula, there is a record of people providing what could be called in Greek a charagma, right? So In the time of Caligula, there is a record of the people providing what would be called in Greek a charagma. A charagma was required by the time of Nero to do business in the marketplace, but before him, we know that Claudius had exiled many Jews because of their lack of cooperation and troublemaking. But this is the part, right? It says what? A charagma was required by the time of Nero to do business in the marketplace, but before him we know Claudius had exiled many Jews. Now what it says that what? You can't buy or sell except you receive the charagma, which is what? Is representation that you are you pledge allegiance, or you are subjected, or you have subjected yourself unto the authority, that the powers that be. Right? Jumping down, it says what would have why would you have one of these state issued charagmas? All right, so there's a question: why would you have one of these state issued charagmas? Because as I say, it's not charagma. It's not one thing, right? It is a general thing that had many uses, but there have those that are privately applied, or those of households, and then you have state ones that had what? The official state seal. As it says, the charagmas would have the Roman seals, right? It says, why would you have one of these state issued charagmas? So you could get benefits as members of a system of Corban which provided social welfare. So if you want to buy or sell, if you want to eat, and that is why it's a what? Them that worship the image of the beast and receive the charagma, right? And when you look up the word worship, it goes back to what? Them that actually like a dog licking his master's hand, or which goes back to even in the same. The Hebrew equivalent is in Psalms 2, where it says, kiss the son lest he be angry, which basically when you kiss the ring, where you kiss the hand of the king to show that, look, I pledge allegiance to you. I'm actually submitting to you. Right? It says, in ancient Latin texts, we see the use of charagma, a Greek word that could represent the badge of servitude or obligation used in reference to a trial to determine the jurisdiction of the court. Right? So it's also used to see if you're within the right jurisdiction. Right? I think there's more. Let me just skip through. No one pilot took funds. It says those who paid in the emperor's system of Corban received a certification that they were members of that system. Right? So those who paid into the emperor's system of Corban received a certification, which is that charagma, that they were members of that system. By the reign of Emperor Decius, AD 250, those who their proof of sacrifice to Caesar could be excluded from the marketplace, right? So guess what? It was also up to prove that, look, they made sacrifice to Caesar. It goes back to what? Idolatry again. It's actually identification that, look, I worship the system, and or the system is my God, pretty much. Right? It says, due to this time they had price controls and sales tax, and identification was essential for enforcement. Right? The system of Corban was at the center of the Roman/Christian conflict. It was also at the center of the conflict between the Messiah and the Pharisees, whose system of Corban made the word of God to none effect. Right? So basically, because they were following, they were in league with Rome and were doing things to appease Rome, they actually was going against the scriptures. That's why Yahushua said to the people, what? Do as they say, but not as they do. And that is why they said that, look, if we don't do something about him, then the Romans will come and take our place, or all the world will actually follow after him. Right? It says, our modern ideas of religion differ from the meaning of the word in the days of the Bible was written. Pure religion was religion rooted in charity alone. Let me read this real quickly. Opposed to Tennessee Christian movements because he saw in Christianity a privatization of religion. transfer of religious values from the public sphere to a private association. All right. All right. Slacky, let me just make a quick scan through this. It says, but the general laws of the empire against foreign religions and the formal edicts of several emperors against the Christians were a sufficient warrant to many governors, Slovakia, to draw the sword against them before time, and we find that the persecution was very hot in Africa 2 years before and under Proconsul Saturninius, right? And it says, see Christian conflict, right? So one of the reasons why you know the Jews were expelled from Rome was based on the fact that they didn't want to come under the charagma, because that would require them to follow certain rules and edicts, right? It says Christians believe all kinds of things about God and the afterlife, etc. Yahushua said little about that, but he was clear that you could not be benefactors like the Gentiles who exercise authority one over the other and force the contributions of the people. Position should be clear that the mark or badge of the bee that proves you must bow down and serve the bee comes in many forms. It will make things difficult, so you can hardly buy or sell in the marketplace if you don't have the badge or badge of service. This has happened off and on throughout the ages and is happening again. As the scripture said earlier, the things that happened aforetime were written for our learning. Also, what the things that which had been is the thing which shall be. Right? This last part says it perfectly. Right? It says it will make things difficult, so you can hardly buy or sell in the marketplace if you don't have the badge of service. This has happened off and on throughout the ages and is happening again. Right? It says for more detail, look at what Revelation real says to go. Didn't really read that. Greek word represented. Charagma is a Greek word that represented the badge of servitude yesterday, whereas the card is not sure about what card they're talking about, but right, the similarities are there. Scrolling through. Right, this says the way of the Messiah was like neither the way of the world of Rome nor the governments of the Gentiles who depended on fathers of the earth through force, fear, and fidelity, who delivered the people back in bondage again like they were in Egypt. The Messiah's ministers and true Christians do not depend upon systems of social welfare that force the contributions of the people like the Korban of the Pharisees, which made the word of God to none effect. Many people have been deceived to go the way of Balaam and the Nicolaitans and out the way of the Messiah and have become workers of iniquity. Right? I think the Nicolaitans are mentioned in the first part of Revelation with the churches. Right? Yeah, I think that's the yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah, that's definitely it. You can actually, read this article right on your own, and hey, the information is out there, so you can definitely see. So let me close out with that precept. Right, this is Revelation chapter 13, or Revelation rather chapter 13 verse 9, sorry, not 9, verse 16. Right, well, as it says, it can start at 15. It says, and he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. And he caused it all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand, a charagma, a ID, something that has written information, right, or engraving. Even like slave back then used to get engraved in their flesh, or get, burnt, or get that imprint with the hot rod, right? Or in their foreheads, that no man might buy or sell save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. All right. So that's pretty much it. Hope this lesson was edifying. Once more, to give all praises, honor, and glory unto Yahweh Hashem Yahweh Shai Hashem Rakak. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule well. Shalom to the brothers in the highways and byways pushing this word in all sincerity and truth. The sisters, the believers, the helps. Shalom.